Welcome to Home Video Hangouts. I'm Cody and I just saw the new movie Civil War. This movie is directed by Alex Garland and it has a strong cast including Kirsten Dunst and Nick Offerman. So I first want to say this movie is not quite what I expected from when I watched the trailer for it. The trailer to me made this seem like it was going to be a action thriller kind of movie, kind of like the Olympus Has Fallen movie. But what it actually was more of a drama movie that had a socially relevant what-if plot, and it had some action thrown into that. The movie follows a small group of photojournalists who are traveling across the US on a road trip going to Washington, D.C. in hopes of interviewing the president. And along the way, they see all kinds of terrible things that are happening because of the war. Everything from violent airstrikes, violent ground warfare, people being burned alive, mass murder, and they're photographing all these things and trying to remain neutral as journalists amongst all of this. And the film does a great job of showing a lot of potentially scary scenarios and how this could play out in the real world in a divisive time in America where a lot of people are worried about a Civil War type scenario in the future. And it does this without pushing any kind of political agenda or forcing the audience into taking a side in the movie, which is really interesting. It kind of puts the photojournalist at the forefront of the movie and kind of places them as not only the protagonists but the heroes of the movie. And it's interesting how they put the main focus on the journalist and portray them as heroes, because it's somewhat different than what we see in the real world, where a lot of the journalists in the real world are pretty divisive and choose one political side or another, and there's a lot of hate that people have towards journalists nowadays. And so it's interesting how they portrayed them in a very neutral and positive way in this movie, and it's interesting to think about a world where there could be a civil war playing out where they are neutral journalists, but that's how they're portrayed. That was the choice made in this movie, and it makes kind of an interesting plot that we haven't seen before where we're following these journalists. And with that, they have kind of unique filming style too, where as these journalists are taking photos of these things happening in the world, they show these images as photographs, right? So what'll happen is one of the journalists will take a picture of a violent scene happening, maybe 3 photos, and then those photos will pop up in full screen, like all 3 of them back to back, and we'll get to see what those photos look like that they actually took. And it makes for just a really unique filming style, which is different than anything I've seen before, and kind of adds to the plot of the movie in a way which is pretty interesting. This film also did a lot with its somewhat limited budget. From what I understand, this movie had a budget of around $50 million, which is much less than other action movies that could be seen as somewhat similar to this have used, and I think they did a really great job with that budget, because there are some very convincing looking action sequences that take place in Washington, D.C., where we see attacks on the White House and different crazy action sequences with this Civil War playing out in this movie, and they make it look very realistic, and it's just impressive that they were able to do so much with this movie with that type of budget. Now, with that being said, there were a couple things I think could have been improved. One is that I feel the trailer was a little misleading, as I mentioned earlier. It seemed like that it portrayed this movie as an action movie or a thriller movie all the way through, and it wasn't as much as it was a drama. But also, I think they could have done a better job with the backstory and kind of explaining what led to the Civil War, but I think their choice not to was, again, a decision to keep things more neutral and not take a political side with this movie. So with all that happening, it kind of made it hard to, in my own mind, think about, okay, who are the heroes in this movie and who are the villains? With a lot of movies we watch, we're used to very specific heroes and villains and understanding who the good guys and the bad guys are, and this movie didn't really allow for that. It just took a approach of kind of showing what this potential scenario playing out could look like. So in conclusion, while I did feel like this movie had a somewhat misleading trailer, I was still impressed by it in a lot of ways. And I think it did a great job of showing what a potential civil war in modern times in the United States could look like. So with that being said, I decided to rate this movie 7 out of 10. And some of the action sequences make this movie worthwhile to watch in the theater, I think. I don't think this is necessarily a movie where I'd say, oh, you have to see it in IMAX or something like that, but it is worthwhile to see this on a larger screen, to see some of these action sequences taking place in Washington, D.C., and these battles taking place. And this does a great job of holding your attention between the action sequences as well. It's not just a boring drama for most of the movie. It does really well in kind of surprising you with things and getting you slowly more and more enveloped into the conflict and wanting to see what happens next. So anyway, that is my perspective on this movie, and if you enjoyed it, make sure you hit the like button and subscribe buttons down below to stay updated on my latest videos and reviews, and I'll see you in the next video. Thanks for watching.